So, as I mentioned in the show intro, this discussion topic came up because you're co-presenting a session at IDEA World Virtual this July, focused on BFR. I know it's used for all sorts of athletes and exercisers, but this World Virtual session will focus specifically on how BFR can be used to help our functional active agers. So, Jim, if you could please start by describing what BFR is and give us a glimpse into the science behind it.
Okay. Essentially, what we do with BFR when we put the bands on is that we're trying to change the character of the venous blood flow out of an extremity. And that's all we'd like to do. So when you don't have the band on, under normal conditions, you can think of venous blood flow returning to the heart as kind of a lazy river that has a pretty constant flow to it. But when you kind of stick a dam in the way of the venous outflow, then what happens is when you do a muscle contraction, the force of the muscle actually forces blood past this obstruction. And so the circulation changes from periods of no venous flow to periods of very high venous flows where, the blood is being rushed over the dam. And the so what of all that is that it makes the supply of blood and oxygen to the working muscle insufficient and inadequate to maintain the level of work that's being done. So slowly a metabolic crisis develops in those working muscles. And this metabolic crisis is perceived as fatigue by the person. And that also then sets off a whole series of systemic responses. The autonomic nervous system responds, the neurohumoral system responds. And what happens is we create a very anabolic situation, both locally in the working muscle or the muscles that we're exercising, as well as systemically where we have this hormonal milieu that's tuned to cause you to build muscles and to lose body fat, lipolysis, as well as an anabolic hypertrophy of muscles, tendons, bones, blood vessels, everything involved in the work.
So I'm probably going to fumble this a little bit, but it sounds like, the knowing how brilliant our bodies are, just the engineering of them and the way they respond, that it's just the body compensating. It's responding to this. It's a stress response, and it takes over brilliantly and has some really great benefits in the offing.
Right, and there's an added twist to this. You get the same systems responding if you, for example, run a marathon or lift super heavy weights. And the body senses that there's been a disturbance of homeostasis, and it starts a series of processes meant to repair the damage it thinks is caused and also to improve the ability to adapt. And the trick here is that instead of using really hard work or long duration work to get into that situation, we've done it with a combination of easy, very doable exercises for everybody and this restriction of venous outflow.
Super fascinating stuff, Jim. Thank you for that overview.
Can I just maybe add a little bit to that?
Of course, yeah.
So for me, and for the listeners, if you think about a band, like a blood, and it might look like a blood pressure cuff. So have that in your mind, and you put that then like at the top of your arms, and at the top of your legs. And like today I did this treadmill workout, and I got on the treadmill, I put the bands on, I pump them up now. And to what Jim is saying, I now do a workout. I'm on I do a incline 3, 6, 9, 12. I get to level 15, and now I'm doing 4 miles per hour. I do 1 minute on, 30 seconds off. And what happens when I get off that treadmill now, 20 minutes later, 25 minutes later, I am feeling as if I just ran 6 miles, because it had that kind of response, not only in my body. And the thing that I really want to get across, it's not only in my body, and we'll get more into this and what's happening to, your blood vessels and everything else, but because of the release of nitric oxide and what that does to dilate the blood vessels, your brain lights up. And that's what everybody talks about with blood flow restriction training. You feel smarter, you feel quicker, you feel like, I always use it before I go on stage or before I go on podcast or whatever, because it really is the systemic response. And just to finish off, I'm doing a workout this afternoon. I'm doing split my workouts today because of this podcast, and I'm doing legs and thighs. But instead of doing my deadlifts I can lift pretty heavy weights, but instead of using that 90, 100 pound for deadlifts, I will use more like a 30 pounds. And now I'm not putting the stress on the joints, but I have my bands on. I'm using those 30-pound weights. I'm doing my deadlifts. And now I'm getting better results than when I was lifting the 100, but I'm not getting, again, the stress on the joints. And the biggest thing for me, I'm recovering. Like, as we age, we don't recover the same way. And when people say, can you still do this or that? I can do just about everything I did before, but I don't recover the same way. But with blood flow, with the BFR bands, you don't have that issue.
So I want to move on to kind of what my gut reaction was when I first started reading about this to prepare for this interview. And I have to say that when I heard blood flow restriction, the first thing I thought of was a tourniquet. So, and then, going back to First Aid 101, that sounded a bit scary to me and maybe like a contraindication for exercise in general, but or other certain populations. How safe is this method of training for older adults, or for any population for that matter?
It's a very important topic, and a very important point you're making. The bottom line is that it can be dangerous, and they actually, in some products, they actually use surgical tourniquets or blood pressure cuffs to try to get to this phase. And we classify those as rigid blood flow restriction systems. And because what happens is, once you get the tourniquet on, and there's just no give, so the muscle or the extra part of the tissues that are contained within that cuff, just if there's any increase in size, there's nowhere to go. So it produces an ischemic thing, and it can actually shut off the arterial inflow into the extremity. But both Katsu and Be Strong are examples of elastic BFR products. And that's an important thing for your audience to really understand, because they are elastic, and so they give when there's an increase in volume in the extremity. And the so what of that is that these things are near impossible to occlude the arterial inflow or to block the circulation. And that's the big benefit from them. So on a practical level, these rigid systems can be made to work, but usually you only find them in physical therapy clinics and things where somebody else is supervising exactly what's going on and being very aware of whether or not the tourniquet is too tight, if you will. Mm-hmm. And but in our case, in the case of elastic BFR, it's virtually impossible to occlude arterial inflow. And therefore, these devices are all safe and can be used by the layperson in the comfort of their own home or anywhere else they choose to do it. So, and then I should also say that all the complications that could come from blood flow restriction training, the root cause is blocking the arteries. And what we want to do is we want to intermittently block the veins and leave the arteries alone. And that's what this elasticity does. So your audience needs to look into exactly what kind of blood flow restriction products that are on the market and what it is that they do. So to be really safe.
Yeah. And Kathy, how about you? Like, how long did it take you to get up to speed with knowing your levels and just feeling really safe with this training methodology?
Well, I felt safe immediately because I went through a course. And I think that's what the audience should hear, that when you go through the course and you see the Doppler machine showing you that the blood's going, the blood's still flowing, everything's working. And then you have to, and once you mentally are feel it's safe, then you have to get used to the sensation. And that's what people say, that at first, when I put it on, different people, it's again that cuff, and then you can pump it up, and you pump it up to a certain level. And of course, when you start pumping it up, you feel that restriction and you feel kind of a tingly sensation. So, or sometimes you might think about it before you start working out. Let's say I'm going to do bicep curls. If I'm pumping up, I haven't started my bicep curls right away. My fingers will start to tingle a little bit. I'll get the sensation in my arms. Eventually, you just like when you get a sensation from training, you love that sensation because you know what's going to come next. But before you do, it's sort of like, oh, what's going on? And it might feel just slightly a little bit, I don't want to say uncomfortable, it's just different. And if you pump it up too much, which there's all these guidelines, if there's a really quick releases, it's very, very, very easy to learn. The learning curve takes about, I would say, a good week, and you can understand where you want your levels to be, where you get your best workout, where it's a little too far. But there's little quick release valves and everything, so that there's never a time where you feel like out of control or that something's going to happen. But I do want to emphasize that, as Jim was saying, that there is this elastic and then there's rigid. And the rigids are the ones where you kind of see like the Boy Scout belt or the surgical tubing. And bodybuilders would use them through the years. And they kind of knew their bodies and what they were trying to achieve. But that is the type of stuff where you can get yourself in trouble. Or something like an elastic band, you can't, so I felt comfortable about a week. And then, I think I, to this day, keep playing around with how much do I want to be using them? How much do I want to use them on the track, on the bike ride, in the swimming pool? Because you can use them everywhere. And pretty soon, you just have them in your workout bag. I have them in my car, and I'm using them at least once a day for something, including yoga classes.
Okay. All right, great.
And in the meantime, I just put a band on and inflated it. It's really quick and simple, and a little pump, and off you go. So that I would say that's one of the big things that we've tried to add to this, to make it really simple, really safe, really easy for anyone to do.